You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
What is going on, Los Angeles? Merry Christmas. Happy holidays from everyone here at the LA Football Network. This is the LA Football Show. I'm Ryan Dyer, joined as always by the great Jamal Madney. Hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas and obviously the holiday season. So much going on in the new year just around the corner. And finally, Jamal, obviously we're going to get into football here, but finally we can say after a few rough years that I feel like 2022 was overall a fairly good year. Obviously it had downs like all years do, had some interesting stuff. We had the election, you had all the political and economical stuff, but overall much better than 2020 and 2021. And we have a lot of great things to look forward to in 2023. And the thing we're going to talk about, which obviously I'll give you time to mention some things too, but the thing we're going to talk about that we are looking forward to 2023 is our Los Angeles Chargers clinching the playoffs with 2 games to go, which is so strange to say, especially for a Chargers team. But after a 20-3 win over the Colts, your Brandon Staley, Justin Herbert led Chargers have clinched a spot in the NFL playoffs, which will begin in the new year. Once again, this is the LA Football Show. Find us everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. Find us on YouTube at LAFB Network, or for your Chargers at LAFB Chargers, and obviously the website LAFBnetwork.com. Jamal, my man, how was your Christmas? Welcome back. I feel like it's been forever, even though it's only been a few days, but how have you been and how is the holiday season treating you so far?
It's treating me well, Ryan. Excited to be back on. You said it. It feels like it's been forever since we've done one of our shows, but you said it best, Ryan. 2022, especially that second half of this year, feels like the world is coming back to normal a little bit. I think there was a tremendous sense of normalcy that we hadn't seen since pre-COVID in these last 6 months. And I think we're going to take the momentum and the positivity from 2022 and springboard that into an epic 2023. And I think the Chargers have channeled all of that positivity into hopefully what will be an epic January and February and all of 23 for the Bolt family.
Yeah, absolutely. And what more normalcy than seeing our airports in chaos with cancellations and luggage everywhere. And so anyone out there that was a Southwest customer, hopefully you were able to finally make it to your destination and either get home or get to where you were trying to go. Luckily we were unscathed in our travel plans and made it back here to Los Angeles on our expected flight time and no delays, got back with no problems. So we were very blessed in that regard. But for anyone out there that I'm sure there's someone out there listening that was affected by that. I had a friend, Jamal, that was flying from Minneapolis to Denver to spend the new year in Denver and ended up flight getting canceled. They found out not because they were alerted, as everyone has kind of talked about how the whole systems were just a mess, but they were able to rent a car and then drove from Minneapolis to Denver. So they made it, just a little bit after their expected time to get back. So I'm sure a lot of people attempted that, but obviously weather's been crazy. So anyway, all of that being said, I think there's still a lot to be thankful for. It's been a great year overall, and happy to have spent this year closer with you, building this show, building this brand, and covering this Chargers team that is in the playoffs. So 20-3 win, Jamal, over the Colts. Yes, not a, hugely scary, dominant offensive juggernaut. No Jonathan Taylor. Nick Foles gets his first the Colts. So obviously not something that a lot of people were expecting to be necessarily a close match. I know we didn't expect it when we did our pregame show, but either way, they get the win. So before I toss it to you, show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. You get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. You can bet on the outcome of these playoffs. Chargers, if you would have bet on the Chargers, Jamal, like 4 or 5 weeks ago, they had fallen down that ladder as Super Bowl favorites, and you could have won a lot of money if they were able to make it to the Super Bowl, which now they're looking a lot better, being one of the final 16 teams or 14 teams, to make the playoffs. So betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE, 50% welcome bonus. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. All right. So Jamal, 20-3, initial thoughts of this win for our Bolts.
Well, the first thing that's most important, Ryan, is the victory, 3 in a row. They're 3/5 of the way through a 5-game winning streak heading into the playoffs, which is something you and I now have talked about for the last several weeks of being able to build that momentum. They're in the playoffs, and now it becomes a game of these final 2 weeks in terms of seeding and playoff positioning. So first things first, the opportunity to make the playoffs, so special to be able to clinch it on the road, to be able to clinch it in their first go at it, in their first attempt to make it to the playoffs. All job very well done. And the tumultuous year that Joe Lombardi has had, that Brandon Staley has had, that Herbert has had at times, all of these injuries, for them to be sitting at 9-6 and in the playoffs, it's really a tremendous effort there. Very proud of the Chargers team and their organization. And now here they are going to be playing meaningful games in January, which is something we expected all the way back in June and July when we were covering this team over the summer right after the draft. And now that has come to fruition. So really excited about the Chargers prospects moving forward. Having said that, Ryan, obviously just in the spirit of being transparent, of being objective, that game was an eyesore, maybe the worst Monday night game I have ever seen in my life. That was a terrible football game from start to finish. The Colts looked absolutely decimated by injury and just by roster construction. I had not realized how far of a cliff Nick Foles has fallen. I mean, Nick Foles doesn't even really look like a credible backup quarterback in the NFL anymore. I think the age, the lack of athleticism, I think has really caught up to him. I thought the Chargers pass rush was fantastic en route to 7 sacks, of course, but Foles just looked completely clueless and lost out there. And I expected a little bit more offensively from the Chargers. I think we both did in terms of verticality of the passing game, but they were able to do just enough. There were some key third down conversions there on that first touchdown drive in the second quarter to kind of create the separation. There was that wonderful play, that flea flicker, the throwback to Herbert and that laser beam to Mike Williams. So did just enough, but I think there's still work to be done for the Chargers to feel like they can make some noise in the playoffs. Step 1 is done. They're in the playoffs. Now the question becomes, can this team actually make some noise in the playoffs, or is this going to be a one-and-done team? So I'm excited to talk about that moving forward. But, of course, step 1 in the books in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Jamal. The big thing is get the win. We talked about this Chargers team all year long about how it hasn't been pretty. We expect the offense to be better than what it has been when you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert and you have the talented skill players they have. And obviously they've had injuries, which we can get into a little bit more later. But even when all guys have been healthy, we haven't seen the dominance from the offense overall. And unfortunately, that kind of played case again in this game. And I think there's factors to that. I think part of it is you have a Colts team that gave up 33 unanswered points the week before and en route to a 39-36 loss in overtime, the biggest ever. And obviously those are guys that are going to be playing for pride. And we kind of talked about in the pregame, like I expect to see a little different Colts defense to probably come out fired up. Like they're playing for pride. That's not who they want to be remembered as. And so that was to be expected, but I still think there was some things the offense didn't quite get out of their own way, which I think we'll talk about. But for me, the big thing, and obviously Nick Foles, not great. Obviously no Jonathan Taylor, all this stuff. But the fact the defense now 3 weeks in a row, under 18 points, this one only 3 points. They lose Derwin James in the first quarter from getting suspended after that hit. Didn't miss a beat. Alohi Gilman has looked great as a starter, as safety when he's played for the injured Derwin James, and then now when he played for the suspended Derwin James. And I think the fact that we've talked about all year long, schematically, this defense has looked sound. The execution and the buy-in has not been sound. And now for whatever it was, 28 games, the defense, or 25 games, the defense really struggled. Statistically, one of the bottom defenses in the entire league. Well, now since the bye, this huge shift in buy-in, in execution, in veteran leadership, guys like Kyle Van Noy, guys like Derwin James, other guys out there, Bryce Callahan, who's been great on other teams. all buying in, and now we're seeing this defense become elite, which is what they need. When you have a star quarterback and an elite defense, you can beat anybody in this league, and especially going in the playoffs. That's what's exciting. Still a lot to clean up, still a lot of things on offense that need to get better, but the offense and Justin Herbert has been great when they've had to be, and the defense now in 3 straight weeks, granted 2 of them not against great offenses, but still doing what they had to do and looking dominant. That is what I think is exciting about this Chargers team heading into the last 2 weeks. And I think they're in a really good spot, and also are getting potentially 2 to 3 more players back to head in that playoffs. And they really could be, Jamal, the most dangerous team heading into the playoffs, which is all you could ask for going in this year. But job number 1, check it off. They're in the playoffs. You can get that monkey off of Brandon Staley's back. You can get that monkey off of Justin Herbert's back, because they're in, and now it's anyone's game once you get to the dance.
For sure, Ryan. And I think that's what's so exciting. You said it best. We've talked about this momentum that's necessary to really be able to make some noise. I'd see there's kind of 3 categories, Ryan, of teams in the AFC in my mind right now. There's the top 3, where you've got the Chiefs, the Bills, the Bengals. Those are 3 teams that you could legitimately see go to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl. They've got 3 of the elite, if not the top 3 quarterbacks in football, 3 of the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks in football between Mahomes, Allen, and Burrow. Then you've got 2 teams in my mind who have the pieces to make a move, but we're still a little bit unsure about who they are. And that to me is the Ravens and the Chargers, where the Ravens with a healthy Lamar Jackson can be as good as those 3 teams. The Chargers with Herbert and the proper scheme can be just as dangerous as those 3 teams. But for whatever reason, those 2 teams haven't quite put it all together just yet, but they can be very dangerous. And then I think the third category is everybody else. And everybody else, whether you're talking about the Titans and the Dolphins and the Jets and the Jaguars, all teams that are just trying to make the playoffs, that's going to be a successful season, but they're not really going to do very much. So to me, the question now becomes, going into these next 2 weeks, how much can the Chargers position themselves to either play a Jacksonville or a Baltimore in the first round and try and avoid those first 3 teams? And then B, how much can they grow now from this to be in that conversation of saying, hey, no, it's not a big 3 in the AFC, but it's really a big 4, and getting pushed into that conversation. So that's what I'm really excited about. And how content are the Chargers with just making the playoffs versus making some noise? Because I love the engagement that we get from Chargers fans on Twitter, on our network, everywhere else. And there's just so much elation right now, rightfully so. But I also don't want that to be confused with being satisfied. Because if you told me at the start of the year that the Chargers are going to make the playoffs, but they're going to lose the wild card game, I would say, that's about a C year. That's about kind of average of what you expect. They haven't really done anything special given what the roster was at the beginning of the year and what their expectations were. Now, obviously, injuries have played a big role, but I want to see this team now mentally saying, okay, playoffs is great. Let's celebrate for a couple of days, but we want so much more. This team is built to do so much more than just make the playoffs. So I'm starting to get really excited now about where is their mindset, where is their culture, where is their focus, and how much do they want to push the envelope to turn the AFC from a big 3 into a big 4.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about the kind of the fan reaction to this game is, and we've said many times, Twitter's not the real world. So you don't want to take account and say the entire fan base is what Twitter is, but you had a large faction of Chargers Twitter elated. Finally, we get back, Justin Herbert, Brandon Staley, hats off. And you have the other half that was still, this team's going to get smoked in the first round. Still need to fire Lombardi. I don't care if they're in the playoffs. Like, they're not going anywhere, yada, yada, yada. So it's a very interesting kind of dichotomy between a split fan base, if you will, which is interesting in the sense of the culture of the fan base being split, in the sense that you have still a lot of San Diego fans and a lot of new LA fans. And it's this melting pot of fans that have seen a years of hurt and dissension and leaving and this, and they kind of still feel like they're fans, but they're not really positive or on like the upside scale. And then you have a newer fan base, not saying all LA fans are brand new. I think there were a lot of LA fans that were fans of the team when they were in San Diego, but now feel more aligned with them being in the same city. But then you do have brand new fans in LA that just started watching football and started watching the Chargers, and they don't have those years of anguish. And it's just like, hey, we're in. We got one of the best quarterbacks in the league. We got a bright young head coach. We're playing one of the best stadiums in the league. So I thought that was very funny that seeing that, I was like, man, I don't know if I've ever seen a fan base so upset over making the playoffs. Like there was just so much not happiness. But then to your point, there was a lot of elation that, hey, we made it this far. And to your point, I agree that this team expectation before the year was more than just making the playoffs. They went through a ton throughout the year, a ton of adversity, which to me, I don't know why Brandon Staley isn't getting talked at for coach of the year. I don't know why that hasn't come up. We'll get into that maybe a little bit more down the line, but I think he should be an absolute candidate when you look at what they went through and how this team has changed throughout the year and where they're at now. But getting off rail a little bit there, but when you look at the expectations beforehand, what happened in the middle of the season, and now where they are with who they're getting back, that beginning expectation now comes back. And now it needs to be more than just making the playoffs. You need to win a game, maybe 2 games. I truly believe this team can make a Super Bowl run. Like Jamal, I have no doubt in my mind. There's a chance we could be sitting in Phoenix on Radio Row like we were last year in LA, talking about the Rams, talking about the Chargers. Like I'm already looking at Airbnbs out there where we're having our studio set up for LAFB, and we're going to be on Radio Row down at the, University of Phoenix Stadium and having a good old time because the Chargers are playing whoever in the NFC. They're that good if they play to their potential and if they meet those expectations. So to kind of close out, we obviously already, running short on time here per usual. What do you think needs to happen to get to that next step where, yes, they're winning these close games. Yes, they're beating these worst teams, but how does this offense meet their mark of becoming the offense that we all know they can be and becoming the offense they need to be in the playoffs to, win 1, 2, 3 playoff games?
Ryan, they have to find a way to be more effective running the football. I think that's sort of the glaring omission here. And for me to totally feel like they can stay in a shootout with the Chiefs and the Bills and the Bengals, they're going to need to do better than the consistent 3.5, 3.6 yards per carry that they've been getting week over week. And I think that starts with variety. I think that, again, I don't really agree with giving Austin Ekeler 15 to 20 carries a game. I think that it needs to be more of a running back by committee. I think you got to give 8 to 10 carries to each of your 3 guys, Spiller, Kelley, and Ekeler. That keeps Ekeler fresh as a weapon in the backfield. And then I think you need to take more shots deeper down the field off of play action. Obviously, Lombardi loves to roll Justin Herbert off of the bootleg, especially to his right side. I think there needs to be more done there where when he is in that play action game, instead of just looking for that check down or that 8-yard out route to a tight end or to Keenan Allen, taking some shots down the field and really creating verticality. Because I think if they can get that dimension, those 2 elements to their offense, now all of a sudden those 17, 20, 23-point type games become 31, 34, 37-point games. And I just don't think they can beat a Kansas City in Kansas City or a Buffalo in Buffalo or a Cincinnati in Cincinnati scoring 23 points. I just don't, as good as this defense has been the last 4 or 5 weeks, keeping those quarterbacks down in a playoff game at home to the tune of under 20 points, really, really tall order. So I'm really looking for the multidimensionality of this offense to come to the forefront. And that's what I'm really looking for these next couple of weeks. You're in now. So you can sort of play call a little bit differently. It's now not so much about trying to get these wins. Obviously, you want to win every game for positioning, but it's now how you win. And what are the different dimensions that you can bring to the table, keeping in the back of your mind, hey, there's a strong likelihood we're going to run into one of those 3 quarterbacks in the first round in their building.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that was my absolute biggest key for this team and this offense is that running game. I feel like we've talked about it ad nauseum, Jamal, over and over again about the running game. And I will say this, they at least committed to it to some extent. They had, I think, 28 total carries, not including Herbert's 5, which, as you know, I never count. But they had 18 or 27 total, 18 for Ekeler and 9 for Kelley. But I agree, there needs to be, I think, as long as you have 25 carries, you give yourself a chance. I've always said that is like the main output. However, getting to this point now and getting to the playoffs, you do need to find a way to be more efficient. I still think you can win games not being super efficient if you run that much and commit with the quarterback you have, but it's going to help you a lot more. When you look at the great quarterbacks in our league right now, outside of maybe one or two, they all have pretty good running games. I mean, I think the worst running game in outside of the Chargers, I think, have like this 31st lowest rushing output per game at like 84 yards a game. The next lowest in terms of elite quarterbacks, I think, is the Bengals at like 94. But you look at the Chiefs, they're averaging like 117 per game. You look at, I know the Packers are having a down year, but Aaron Rodgers still elite quarterback. They're at like 130. You look at the Bills, they're at like 150 something. You look at the Eagles, they're at like 170. Like, rushing matters still in football. Even with elite quarterback play, you have to have a solid running game because that's what makes your quarterback elite. All these years, Brady was so good. He never really had a blue chip running back, but they had efficient running games when it mattered that they could run the play action off, keep the defense honest. And so this next step for this offense, and people can blame it on play calling. They can do whatever they want. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, Jamal. And it's no disrespect. We love Austin Ekeler, but I think even he would tell you, I'm not going to quote him, but I feel like I'm a small guy. I know my limitations. I think he would tell you, I'm not a 18, 19, 20 carry guy between the tackles. I'm a 20 touch guy for sure, but I want to be outside the tackles. I want to be in space. I want to get the ball this way. And so the Chargers, which seemingly they should have with Joshua Kelley or Isaiah Spiller at this point. Obviously, we could talk down the line and drafting a guy like Zach Charbonnet in the future. But for now, they have two big bodies guys that I think can do things between the tackles. And so that is where, if we're being nitpicky about coaching staff or whatever, the usage with the running backs has been interesting. Because to my knowledge, I think Isaiah Spiller and Sony Michel were both scratches last game. They only had two backs on the roster going into this game. And Joshua Kelley obviously got 9 carries, but that is going to be the next step, Jamal, is getting into that, because I agree with you. I think this defense is showing that they can be good enough. And we talked about it a few episodes ago that when you get to the playoffs, things tighten up and you're rarely going to see huge scoring games. And we talked about it. Rams won every game by basically 3 points. And it was like 20-17, 23-20, 24-21. So they were not very like high scoring games. You look at even the Bengals, they were like 17-14, but you want to have in your back pocket that your offense can absolutely explode. And if needed, can put up 30 points, 31 points. And to do that, they have to be more effective on the ground and take some of the pressure out of the passing game.
No doubt, Ryan. And obviously the game tightens up, but look, when the road sort of goes through Kansas City, you're going to have to go into Arrowhead and win. And even last year when the Bengals beat the Chiefs, that was a game in the high 20s. And that was sort of courtesy of a lot of mistakes. When Brady went down there and beat Mahomes a couple of years ago in the AFC Championship game, that was 37-31 in an absolute shootout. So in order to beat some of these teams, you saw the game last year between the Chiefs and the Bills, that all-time classic. That was a high 30s, low 40s game. So when you're talking about those types of games and that type of competition, agree. In general, it's going to be a lower scoring game. In general, it's going to come down to 1 or 2 plays there and executing at the end. But there is that one game every playoff run, oftentimes, especially when you're talking about the Kansas Cities and the Buffaloes of the world, where you're going to need to put some points on the board to be able to be a credible threat. And the reality is, where this draw is for the Chargers right now, chances are they're going to have to play one of those teams in the first round with them in their building. So I think that this is all about kind of getting honed and set up the right way. Now, if you can get those teams in certain physical situations, I think it can be very beneficial for you. The game that kind of comes to mind is that Bengals-Patriots game this past week, Ryan, where the Bengals were running away with it 22-0. Patriots, stuck with the run game, really sort of controlled tempo, played really good situational defense, got back in that game on the verge of going ahead in that game, had an untimely fumble. So there's definitely opportunities when you play sound situational football across all three dimensions. But for me, I need to see a little bit more variety in this run game now. Ekeler, obviously, everyone talks about the 16 touchdowns this year, leading the NFL. Whoop-de-doo. A lot of those are inside 5 yards, and, they keep force-feeding him the ball for those touchdowns. He's not an elite running back to me. He's not even really an average running back to me at this point, to be very honest with you. He's elite out of the backfield as a receiver, but as a true running back, I think he's below average to average. And I think they're going to need to create some variety there in the backfield to take some pressure off of Herbert and also just bring different wrinkles to this team.
Yeah, and I think, and last point on that, I think where my frustration with Lombardi and this offensive staff has been, because I definitely am not on the ilk of the, fire him and he's the worst ever. I don't think we both are. But where I have been frustrated is, they clearly want to bring in they clearly have brought in a very similar Sean Payton system. Obviously, he was on Sean Payton's staff for many, many years, went to Detroit, came back, being the QB coach with Drew Brees and all that. So they clearly want to invoke that, and they clearly have. I mean, if you watch a lot of comparisons on tape between the two offenses, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, Drew Brees, for many, many years, was the lowest QB in terms of air yards because it was a lot of checkdowns, a lot of just getting receivers in space where then they could do things with the ball. And then it opened stuff up for some deep passing here and there. Now, obviously, Justin Herbert has a much bigger arm than Drew Brees ever had, so they're able to do different wrinkles and different things. But the frustrating thing for me is that all those years in New Orleans, they had that, Mark Ingram type running back. That was your lead back, and they had an off the pace back. Obviously, in the later years, they got an Alvin Kamara. And in the beginning, now I know he's taken more of a bigger role, but in the beginning, Alvin Kamara was not this 25 carry bell cow back. He was the guy catching the ball in the backfield. He was dynamic. He was doing things outside of the tackles. That's what Austin Ekeler is. So you can't now run this style of offense, but you don't have, or you do have a Mark Ingram, but you're not using him. You're using Alvin Kamara to be your Mark Ingram. And that has been kind of the frustration where I think they can do different things to be more efficient with how they use the running backs. Now, I'm, as much as everyone wants to, whine and complain on Twitter, you'll be first to say, we're not coaches or GMs, but to me, that's a fairly simple fix that could absolutely have really good ramifications for this team and take some pressure off of Justin Herbert. So before I bring up the last point, I don't know if you have any thoughts or anything to add on that.
Yeah, Ryan, I think it's a really good point. And I think you brought up something interesting. There's always this conversation about Sean Payton, right? That's the elephant in the room. That's the murky cloud of, regardless of what happens this season, they made the playoffs, they lose in the first round, they lose in the second round, whatever the case may be, do you bring in Sean Payton? And so much of the conversation is around what he did with Brees. And if they sort of take that philosophy, even though Lombardi is from the Payton coaching tree and not much is going to radically change in that regard. Here's the interesting part. I'm not sure Sean Payton's philosophy works with Justin Herbert. Sean Payton's philosophy with Drew Brees was a match made in heaven. You talk about those air yards. Brees didn't have a very big arm to begin with. Brees was a very cerebral quarterback. Brees's game was predicated on getting the ball out early, making the right reads, and really being incredibly accurate with the football. And not just accurate in terms of throwing the football, but throwing the football in spots where not only could receivers catch it, but really do things after the catch. That's what made Drew Brees so special. And it really was an extension, everyone forgets, to his college days at Purdue when they were running what they used to call basketball on grass with Joe Tiller and Purdue. And that's what enabled Purdue to make their last Rose Bowl run back in the 99 season. So it was a very seamless transition to what he was doing in college to the pros, and he found the right situation. For me, Herbert has such a huge arm. All of these laser beams that's coming out of his, right shoulder. And then when you couple that with his mechanics right now are still a little bit flawed in this sort of short passing game where a lot of dirt balls, a lot of balls over the head, a lot of even completions where guys can't really do much with it after the catch. And so to me, And I'm not knocking Herbert. I'm saying there's sort of an evolution there over the years as he sort of matures more. But I don't even think Herbert, in terms of who he is with his physical traits, necessarily works that well in this Sean Payton offense, which is why obviously you need that running back variety dimension that you brought forth here, Ryan. But you need to be able to add verticality to the passing game. Otherwise, what's the point? Having Justin Herbert and playing this dink and dump game is like having a Ferrari in your garage and never taking it out for a test drive. It's like having a Ferrari in Manhattan. That's really what's happening here, because you've got the car to sort of unleash on these great drives, but you're stuck in these narrow roads and the traffic of a place like Manhattan. And that's kind of what's happening here. And rather than saying, well, let's use the Ferrari to turn in and turn out of these narrow roads, you got to say, well, what's the road that works best for the Ferrari? And to me, I still think it's a round ball in a square peg with this whole Sean Payton philosophy and his way of producing great quarterbacks and great offense. Sean Payton's a great coach, but there has to be synergy between coach and quarterback as well. And I just think Herbert's a different guy. You need a different coach offensively for a Herbert. You need a guy like Doug Peterson. You need a guy like Andy Reid. You need some of these other guys who are used to playing with quarterbacks with bigger arms and being able to stretch the field more vertically than just a Sean Payton.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're on the same page there, because we've said even before, like, unless Staley absolutely crashes and burns and flames out, which I'm going to just say now, anyone listening, Brandon Staley will be the head coach of the Chargers next year, especially because they have clinched the playoffs. But I just didn't see, as great as Sean Payton is, and hopefully you've heard other episodes, we kind of went down his resume a little bit, and he is a phenomenal coach, potentially will be a Hall of Famer coach, so many winning seasons down in New Orleans. But there, aside from the winning, aside from Drew Brees' records, aside from the one Super Bowl win, which I know we talked about, like, you got all this and you only got one, aside from all that, I just didn't see enough where it's like, what would change so much from what the offense is now? Because right. I don't think obviously there was some upsetness with the defense, but now we've seen the defense change. We've seen the culture change. We've seen this team make the playoffs. So what Sean Payton would bring in, everyone is expecting would be to enhance the offense, but how much more would it? Now, obviously he's the architect of it. It'd be like saying, Bill Belichick versus Matt Patricia. Like, obviously there's a big difference there. They're different coaches. Sean Payton is the architect, but in terms of the scheme and the style, not a whole lot would change. And so what you're saying, what I'm agreeing with, is I think we've gotten to a point now where unless we see Lombardi kind of divulge off of that system, we need to see, it might be time to see a new OC that brings in a different style of offense. And it won't be obviously this year, but depending how the playoffs go, and, hey, if they end up going to win the Super Bowl, obviously nothing's going to change. But that is kind of what you're saying. And I agree with you in the sense that I think Lombardi's been fine. I think the play calling has not been as bad, but it might just be, it just doesn't fit necessarily with your quarterback. And it's strange because if you watch the all 22 Jamal, there's plenty of play calls that have receivers deep, but there's never open. I mean, so whether that's just the style of routes you're running, how you're pairing guys, and let's be honest, some of that could fall on Justin Herbert. I mean, a lot of times, and we're getting off base here or off topic a little bit, and we're not trying to downplay on Justin Herbert at all. But a lot of times when these quarterbacks get plays, you'll get sometimes 2-3 play calls in the huddle, and it's up to the quarterback then to make the call at the line of scrimmage based on what the defense is giving you. And he may not be calling the right play based on the defense. I mean, it could be that. I'm not saying it is that, but that could very well be a thing. So I have one question for you, and then I want to end with some final Brandon Staley talk. So my one question for you, if this season ends with one and done in the playoffs, or even if they get to the divisional round, even if they win the wild card, get to the divisional round, do you think, and we still have a lot of weeks to talk about, but do you think they should move on from Joe Lombardi at OC? And B, putting you on the spot here without a lot of research, are there any potential candidates on your mind? And obviously, if not, because you haven't really researched it, this will be something we'll talk about all offseason long. But if there are there any guys out there that you could see being a good fit here?
Great question, Ryan. I think that if this team goes one and done, I think that you have to sort of make the move from Lombardi. And I think it's sort of a natural extension to what we're talking about. For Lombardi to be successful, he has to deviate from the things that he's learned from Sean Payton, because I don't think this offense fits with this quarterback. So that is going to be glaring. Look, at the end of the day, it depends on how bullish you are on Justin Herbert, but depending on your degree of bullishness, he is anywhere between the 4th best and the 8th best quarterback in football. And so if he falls anywhere within that range, you should probably be doing better than just making the wild card game. And so as a result of that, you have to sort of look and make a change to Lombardi. Now, who is the coach? Who should the coach moving forward? I don't know exactly yet. Hey, one guy that's known to sort of deal with quarterbacks and has been kind of a quarterback factory the last 7 or 8 years has been Lincoln Riley, with 3 Heisman Trophy winners and a guy in Jalen Hurts who finished 2nd in the Heisman and who, oh, by the way, is going to most likely be the MVP of the NFL. And, oh, he also lives just sort of down the street in your city. So it would be worthwhile. Obviously, there's a lot of NFL guys out there, different coaching trees and what. But if I was the Chargers ownership brass, I would at least give Lincoln Riley a call, give Lincoln Riley an interview. Now, the Chargers might not be able to afford Lincoln Riley considering what he's getting paid at USC, but certainly worth looking at and exploring, because I think you got to think a little bit more outside of the box in terms of having the quarterback that you do with Justin Herbert.
So are you saying you would be willing to move on from Brandon Staley and bring Lincoln Riley in as the head coach? Or as the OC? I doubt Riley's going to leave the head coach at USC to be the OC.
If Riley wants to come, if the price is right and Riley comes as the head coach, I think you have to consider it. I love Brandon Staley. I love what he brings to the table. I love how he's instituted the defense. But at the end of the day, this team is not going to win Super Bowls because they're going to be confused with the 85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens or the 2013 Broncos, or pick your great defensive team. This team will be either a Super Bowl champion or a multi-Super Bowl champion because of one Justin Herbert. And so you got to make the move to be able to maximize his success. So if Lincoln Riley's out there, I think you have to strongly consider it. Now, having said that, if you're looking more at kind of just the OC role, Ryan, I got to think about it a little bit more. And pairing Staley with a great OC makes a ton of sense. But I think you do need to move on from Lombardi one way or the other. Yeah,
I agree with you. And I think for me, I think Staley's built the culture that is needed to be here. And you look at like the likes of Bill Belichick, the likes of Sean McDermott, these defensive guys that as long as they can get that OC in to honestly work around their QB, because a lot of these guys lose their OCs because they end up getting head coaching jobs, but they're able to kind of fill in and do. I mean, you look at the Bills losing, Brian Dable, and their quarterback coach, Ken Dorsey, comes in and the offense hasn't missed a beat. So finding that system, that this is the system, and Brandon Staley has said many times he's involved in the offense. He's involved in kind of what that system looks like because he is the overarching head coach. And so finding a guy that says, hey, this is what Herbert does great. And so even if you're not here, I'm the head guy. I can make sure someone else can fill in and do that job. But it's about implementing the correct system. And I think it starts with looking around the league at different things. One guy that comes to mind, Jamal, just off the top of my head, and I'm not saying he would be great, but Justin Herbert's former college coach, Mark Helfrich, is available.
Yeah.
He went from Oregon to be the Chicago Bears offensive coordinator. Obviously, it didn't go great there, but he knows Herbert. He knows what he's good at. I know there's been a lot of talk about, was Herbert not used well in college? So maybe that's not a good fit, but at least that's some familiarity there. I look at someone like, and I'm not saying this is a good fit, I'm just throwing names out, someone like a Liam Cohen, who the Rams offense obviously has not been great this year at all, but Sean McVay has produced offensive coordinators around the league like a factory. And so there's a guy that doesn't call plays right now and could go just across the street or across the field, I should say, in the locker room and be able to call plays with the Chargers. So I think there's other options out there that could be fun that we'll dive into for sure if that were to come to fruition, if this team doesn't make it all the way. Because I think it's, for me, I'm at the point, and again, I'm not nearly as pessimistic on Lombardi as most, but I think I am at the point that unless this team wins the Super Bowl, I think it would be time to make a change at the OC. If they bring him back, I'm not saying they're doomed. It's the worst thing, but I think to maximize that window, to maximize what they have, it would be worth making a change and seeing something else out there. And, maybe Shane Day, the QB coach, could do something, but he's called plays once and it was at UConn. So that's kind of an
Ryan,
interesting
I'll
one to
take
think
it
about.
one step further, and I think this is where you and I deviate a little bit. I completely agree with you. I really like Staley. I think, of course, he's safe. He's coming back. But if that offensive mind needs to be the head coach, I think it's a decision that you have to make. Because I think that, at least where I'm at, Staley to me is that girlfriend that you're not breaking up with, but you're not ready to marry her yet. And so you're just kind of saying, look, she's my girlfriend for now. Let's see where this goes in another 6 months. Let me give it another year, see what's up. I'm not ready to marry her yet, but I also don't want to break up with her yet. And so Staley to me is sort of in that ilk, and I think that had a great rookie year, 9-8. He's in the playoffs this year. Let's see what happens. I think there's still, there's some still things on the edges of his decision-making that sometimes puzzle me. I think there's other things. I think the Chargers, obviously, with the injuries they've had, he's done a masterful job. They've also been the beneficiary of a really easy schedule down the stretch, Ryan, and that doesn't get talked about enough. So I think the jury's still a little bit out. He's coming back next year. But if the supermodel walks in, if Giselle gives you the time of day, if the next Victoria's Secret model gives you the time of day, and you're in a relationship where you've got your girlfriend that you're not really ready to marry, you got to at least entertain that conversation. And so to me, I completely agree with you. I think you got to move on from Lombardi, just given how this offense has gone over the year. They just need a new energy. They need some new innovation. But I'll take it one step further. If that offensive mind needs to be the head coach, given where he's come from or what his career arc is, I think you still have to consider it. I don't think you have to blindly do it, but I think as an ownership group, you have to at least think about it strategically about what you want to do.
Yeah, it's fair. So, and I think a lot of people would agree with you. I'm just on the other side where I married Brandon Staley after 1 week of dating. I love the guy. I'm a huge Staley guy. So, but I totally understand the sentiment. I think half the fan base for sure agrees with, or probably more than half. You have some that just want him gone still, regardless. And then I think there's some that on your line of thinking that, yeah, he's been good, but if we can get Sean Payton, many say, if we can get Lincoln Riley, one of these, you absolutely do it. So, but yeah, OC, I think it's time. So let's end with this. Since we're talking Brandon Staley, I brought up in the very beginning. Do you think he should be in the conversation for Coach of the Year? Because I haven't heard it brought up at all. And now being playoff bound, being all the adversity that I went through, I don't see how he's not, me personally, but what's your thoughts on it?
I think he should get a lot more consideration and praise than he is getting. I think that sometimes there's sort of a narrative at the start of the year that's so hard to shake. All of these awards, Ryan, MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, whether you look at the NFL or you look at the NBA, they're so narrative driven. And I think that sometimes that narrative works in your favor and sometimes it can be a curse. And I think in Staley's case this year, it's been a little bit of a curse because at the start of the year, there were such expectations with this team, and then they fell off, and then they had the injuries. And now for him to lift them back up, I think is, put him in a phenomenal position. Now, I will say they are kind of that 5 seed right now, which is if you look at the rest of the AFC, you're like, well, they're better than the Jets. The Dolphins can't win a game anymore. They've forgotten how to win. The Titans are 7-8. They're on a losing streak. Jacksonville's 7-8, going to win their division. So when you still even look at this roster, even with all the injuries, they're kind of like, well, yeah, they should be 5th. They should be no lower than 5th, given what else is kind of the state of the AFC. So I think that's hurt them a little bit. I think if the Chargers were sort of a 3 seed or even a 3 seed, 4 seed, 2 seed, I think he'd be getting a lot more love than he is right now. But having said all of that, I think he's done a terrific job. And that's why he's still your girlfriend for another year, because you're like, hey, I can maybe see this go. I'm just not ready to pop the question just yet.
Yeah. No, I agree with all that. One thing that this is where I just So this is according to BetMGM. And I won't read all the odds, but I'll just read you the order. So this is the top 13 odds for Coach of the Year. You have Sirianni 1, agree. Dan Campbell 2, totally. If they hit the playoffs, Dan Campbell should, bar none, get it. Kyle Shanahan 3, Brian Dable 4, Kevin O'Connell 5, Doug Peterson 6, Robert Saleh 7, Pete Carroll 8, Sean McDermott 9, Andy Reid 10, Mike McDaniel 11, Mike McCarthy 12, Zach Taylor 13. So not even in the top 13. And you have a coach in Zach Taylor who was in the Super Bowl last year, still has Joe Burrow above him. You have a coach in Sean McDermott who was in the right before the AFC Championship game or the divisional championship game, has Josh Allen. You have Andy Reid, who obviously Andy Reid is always great. He could potentially win it every year, but nothing's changed. Still Pat Mahomes. You have Mike McCarthy. His team's been the same. You know, they've floundered out last year. That's where I'm like, how do you not have a coach that went through all that adversity and is now in the playoffs? And this is updated as of an hour ago, these odds. So how, and I totally get Sirianni and Campbell. I get Brian Dable, what they've done in New York, even though they're kind of floundering a bit and may end up, they're on the fringe now, but obviously he doesn't have Justin Herbert. He has, a different quarterback that isn't nearly as good. I understand Doug Peterson, absolutely, what they've turned around there in Jacksonville. I totally get Kevin O'Connell. What he's doing in Minnesota is unbelievable. But even a guy like, I know it sounds like I'm hating, but even a guy like Kyle Shanahan at third, like, how are those not the expectations for the Niners? Look at that roster. And cool, they have 2 more wins than the Chargers and haven't had the same adversity. They get Christian McCaffrey at the half. So I don't disagree with those guys being in it. I just don't see how you don't see what Brandon Staley did and not have him even in the odds, which basically tells you that he's not even in the conversation of it. That's what I don't get, because what they've dealt with and where they are, I agree with everything you said. I think it's hurt that they're 5 instead of 3 or whatever. But having a guy like Andy Reid and all Pete Carroll and these guys that have been there forever, and Pete Carroll, I think, looked great 4 weeks ago, but now the Seahawks are not even going to make the playoffs probably. It's like, what are we doing here?
No, I completely agree with you, Ryan. To me, Staley should be a top 6, top 7 guy for Coach of the Year. There's 6 or 7 names on that list that to me are totally credible, legitimate, being in the conversation. And then there's another 6 or 7 that is just sort of based on reputation and last year's narrative, and there's just sort of an incumbency effect. So I couldn't agree with you more. He definitely deserves more praise. I think, again, what's hurt him is that the perception is that Herbert's a top 4 quarterback and he's a number 5 seed. So there's still an argument that this team is underachieved, okay, when you talk about who the quarterback is. And second, when you look at the resume, the Chargers might not beat a playoff team going into the playoffs with the way it's going with the Titans and the Dolphins. So I think those 2 things really hurt him, but they shouldn't. And I think that's the bottom line. I think he's done a really terrific job this year, and they're going to be one of the 14 teams that are in the playoffs. And there's another 18 teams that can't say that.
Yeah. We'll see if it changes over the last 2 weeks, but I just find that interesting that he's not even in the top 13. And one of the guys that was in the Super Bowl last year, and nothing's changed. So anyway, that's all the time we got. This is the LA Football Show, your Chargers edition. Chargers are in the playoffs. A lot of work to be done, a lot of work to do to get over that hump, but they've clinched. Now they're in the dance with 2 weeks to go. They do play the Rams this week. We didn't really discuss it at all because there's a lot we were getting into, but New Year's Day, the battle for LA against the Rams. We'll try to get some preview stuff up for it coming out. We'll be at SoFi actually doing a tailgate takeover. Our tailgate takeover show with Brittany Betts and Paula D will be live at SoFi. So make sure to check out that as we'll be cruising around Thunder Alley, all you Chargers fans. So for Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dyer. This is the LA Football Show. Talk to you guys all soon.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.